Hello, everyone. This is Mr. Friedman here. This is an introductory video on mathematics that you will need for physics courses, honors or regents physics courses. I'm going to call this a math primer, which I'm splitting into 4 different parts. So this is the first part here, and we're going to basically talk about some algebra. You definitely need to know algebra. Your algebra skills should be pretty strong. And the algebra that you're going to do is, basic manipulation of algebra, but you also need to be able to do this with variables and not just numbers. So you need to know how to work variables around an equation. You need to know how to solve equations for different variables. You've probably all done this and maybe just need a little bit of refresher. For some of you, it's going to go super quick. We're going to talk about substituting numbers in. And I'm going to end with talking about a button on your calculator that's the EE button or the E button. That I think everyone could really benefit from. So definitely pay attention to that part because it's going to make your life easier at times. So let me just talk about basic algebra. And I'm going to start by putting an equation here. So let's just pen blue ink. Okay. I'm going to take an equation here, which is f sub g equals mg. So first thing you got to realize is that there are 3 variables here, even though it might look like there's 4. There's really just 3. F sub g is going to be equal to your force of gravity, which is known as your weight, aka weight. This is an equation that's going to come up a ton of times. M is equal to the mass of the object, and g is a constant. That is known as the magnitude of the acceleration due to gravity. So we have one form of this equation, but you want to be able to find different forms of this equation. So you could take it, for example, f sub g equals mg, and maybe you want to solve for m. That means you want to get m on its side by itself. And in order to do that, you need to get rid of the g. So you can put a g there. And if you put a g in the bottom, then you got g divided by g. That's just 1. But if you do that, whatever you do to the right side, you got to do to the left side because it's an equation. So it needs to still be equal at the end. So if you divided the right side by g, you got to divide the left side by g. And that gets you your equation m equals f sub g over g. And it's called sub because it's a subscript there. So that's one way to get an equation, basic algebraic manipulation. You're going to see more complicated versions of this, but it is important for you to realize what you're trying to solve for. So let's say instead we're going to do the same equation, but we want to not solve for m, we want to solve for g. Could divide both sides by m. Now you've got m divided by m, that's 1. And so if it's 1, we don't need to even write it. If it's a multiply by g, 1 times g is just g. So when we get g is equal to f sub g over m, boom. 2 pretty basic algebraic manipulations. No trouble there whatsoever. Okay, now I'm going to make it just a little bit more complicated here. Let's erase all this ink here. And I'm going to give you the slope equation. Y equals mx plus b. So now let's say that we want to solve for x. And you'll notice I like putting variables on the left side that I'm solving for. So eventually the x will be on the left side. It'll be x equals something, something. Y equals mx plus b. So we can't divide by m yet because there's other terms here. So we want to isolate the mx first. And we can do that by simply subtracting b from both sides. So then you get y minus b equals mx. And now we can solve for x by dividing both sides by m. And so m over m goes away, and then you get x equals, and I'm just going to switch sides here because I like the x on the left side, y minus b over m. So pretty straightforward algebra. I do want to talk a little bit about squaring and square roots because that's going to come up sometimes too. So let's say you have a square root equation, something like this. KE equals 1/2 mv squared. So KE is going to basically be what we call kinetic energy. Again, it's really just one variable, but we're writing it using two letters. There's a constant of a half, m is mass, and v is velocity. So let's solve for velocity. We want to find v equals something. Well, the first thing we need to do is we need to get rid of that 1/2 and that m. And we can do this. You can do this in one step. You can do it in multiple steps. But if you want to get rid of 1/2, you could divide by 1/2, but you could just multiply by 2 also. So that means if we multiply the right side by 2, we multiply by the left side by 2. And so 2 times 1/2 goes away. Those cancel out. And we could divide by m. So then that m goes away and that m goes away. But we have to divide the left side by m also. So if you want to do it in one step, that's fine. If you want to do it in multiple steps, that's fine. Whatever you want to do is fine. There are going to be times you need to show your work. But this gets us v squared, because that's all that's left on the right side, equals 2 times kinetic energy over mass. Now we have a square in there, and we want to get rid of that square because we want to solve for velocity. We don't want to solve for velocity squared. So we're going to take a square root, because we know the square root of a square is just the original variable v. Now technically it's plus or minus v. So if you want to get technical, this could be a plus or minus. And for velocity, the plus or minus usually indicates your direction. Okay, so then that means that your velocity is going to equal 2k e over m. Now I will usually not include the plus or minus unless I'm doing numbers, like actually substituting it with numbers. And then I might explain why it needs to be plus or minus. Okay, so there will be times again when you need to do like square roots or square functions and stuff like that. Next up, I want to talk about substituting into these. So you could take that equation that you had before. Actually, let's just go back here and erase a bunch of stuff. Okay, so let's say we're actually using this equation and you want to solve for something. So let's say that you know your kinetic energy is going to be, ooh, I made a mistake on the last one. I realized I forgot the square root sign. Or I left it out. Okay, the square root of 2k e over m. Oops, okay, at least I caught it. Ke, let's say we have numbers for these. Ke equals, I don't know. I want to just say 100 joules. And we'll say mass is equal to 2 kilograms. Now, when we're solving for this, there's different ways to do it. You could just say, start with your first equation, Ke equals 1/2 mv squared. And you could substitute here. You could say 100 joules. Now, note, you really want to, I probably didn't need parentheses there. You really want to use units. That's going to be an important part of this class. 1/2 times 2 kilograms times v squared. And then you could solve it that way using your numbers. So you end up getting v squared is equal to 100. And I'm not going to get into the units yet. We have them in the original one. We need to have them in the answer as well. So v should equal the square root of 100, which is going to be 10. And we know the units for velocity need to be meters per second. So there's our velocity of 10 meters per second. So you're going to need to substitute numbers in and do some solving as well. It does not matter if you do it like that versus if you do it later on. So you could take what we did already and there we go. Say v is equal to the square root of 2ke over m. And then you could do your substituting there as well. Doesn't matter which way you do. 2 times 100 joules. It does matter that you do your units in there. So that's the square root of 100, which is going to be 10 meters per second. I always like to box my answers as well. Okay. And finally, last but not least, well, you know what? Before I go on, actually, let's talk about this. You can use this mathematical equation here to probably figure out the units are, because I'll tell you, joules is not like a simplified unit. If you think about it, a joule per kilogram when you take the square root of it has to equal our answer for the units to make sense, right? A joule divided by a kilogram have to equal meter per second when you take the square root of that. So you could figure out what these units are too. You could even say square these. So you could say joules divided by kilograms is equal to meters squared per second squared, which what I get when I square both sides. And you could then solve for joules by multiplying both sides by kilograms. So then kilograms meters squared per second squared. So you could solve for a joule if you want to, using the same techniques we've just learned. Okay. I do want to talk a little bit about the calculator button now too. There's a button on your calculator, and sometimes it's usually a second function button. Sometimes it'll say EE. Sometimes it'll just have one capital E. Occasionally it has a lowercase e, which I really hate. But, well, that's actually not true. What I should say is that often what you see on your calculator physically displayed versus what you see on the screen might look a little bit different. So in this case, second function is going to get you the blue things, and then there's an EE button. So that's what you're going to use there. Same here, second function and there. Now, when it shows up on your screen, it might only have one E. So even though it says 2 there, it might only have one. Hopefully it's capitalized, but it might be lowercase. But essentially, it replaces the 10 to the something power. So here, for example, 2.1 times 10 to the negative 6, or 10 to the 6th, is really just 2.1 E6. And you'll notice that it does type out to be fewer characters, which is one of the reasons that we like it. And there's some other reasons that we like it too, like things fit on the screen a little bit better. But it also knows where to put parentheses correctly, and that's something that people sometimes struggle with, is that if you want to do math correctly, you often have to put a lot of extra parentheses in that you might not need if you use the E button. So I really strongly recommend it, and I will write it out. Sometimes I'll write out 2.1 E6, which is 2.1 million, as opposed to writing 2.1 times 10 to the 6th, or writing 2100000, which I could have done as well. So that's the button there. Don't get this confused with the lowercase e button, which you will see on a lot of calculators as well, and is used for a natural logarithm. I'm not going to even point it out to you. I don't want you to well, you'll see it here. Okay, I will point it out. What the heck? If you look here, for example, at it has e to the x. That's not what we want. That's bad. So we're not going to use that. Okay. So you're looking for the capital one. Having said all this, if you look at this, just try this. It's not. Once you go away. Okay. Try this mathematical equation, 2.0 times 10 to the 4th times 1.0 times 10 to the 8th divided by 2 times 10 to the 6th squared. Try that, and if you do this with your calculator without the E button and with the E button, hopefully you get the same answers, but it wouldn't shock me that if you get a different answer without, because it's pretty common for someone to say, like, if they don't put parentheses in the right place, it might not square, for example, the whole bottom. It might just square part of the bottom function. So try this and see, but hopefully you will get a result that is the same. And I think it works out to be, let's see, 2 times 10 to the 4th times 1 times 10 to the 8th is 10 to the 12th with a coefficient of 2. 2 times 1. So 2 times 10 to the 12th divided by 2 times 10 to the 6th squared, which is 4. 2 squared is 4. 10 to the 6th squared is 10 to the 12th. So 2 times 10 to the 12th divided by 4 times 10 to the 12th should get you, what, 1/2, right? So just check that. Make sure that you're doing this correctly. And don't be afraid to use that EE button early on throughout the year. It saves you work when you're doing problems as well. Okay. I think that is it for now. End of the video.